You good?
Cool.
Okay. It is 5:06, and we will call the North Kingston School Committee special meeting of July 11th to order. The first item on the agenda is going into executive session to convene into executive session pursuant to RIGL 42464 for discussion of any job discussion or performance, character, or physical or mental health of a person or persons, provided that such person or persons affected shall have been notified in writing and advised that they may require the discussion to be held in open meeting pursuant RIGL 42465A1, certified employee A, certified employee B, and certified employee C. And number 2, sessions pertaining to potential litigation/legal advice and collective bargaining pursuant RIGL 42465A2, John Doe 42 and Parent Doe 42 versus NKSD, CANOPC 2022-02220, John Doe 23 and Mother Doe 23 and Father Doe 23 versus NKSD, CANOPC 2022-03122. So do I have a motion to go into executive?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we will be back. safe antibiotic.
Yeah, doxycycline.
Ugh. Ugh.
Nice to see it on your face. Nice, you feel like I'm back.
Will there be a PowerPoint tonight?
What was that?
Will there be a PowerPoint tonight?
There will. Not I know.
Okay. That's right. So we will reconvene into open session, and thank you so much for your patience on the time. And so the first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, so please join me in repeat that.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Aaron Earl.
Here.
Robert Case.
Here.
Jennifer Hoskin. Here. Jennifer Lima. Here. Thomas Bryady.
Here.
Christine LaPierre.
Here.
Okay, and the calendar.
Tuesday, August 15th, school committee business meeting. Thursday, August 24th, school committee business meeting. Subcommittees, Wednesday, August 16th, DEI subcommittee meeting. And July 24th, policy meeting.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is citizens' comments, and so if you have already signed up, wonderful. If you'd like to still sign up, there is an opportunity. I'll call for additional comments. And so we would ask just if you are able to come over to the microphone so that the recording can hear you, and we'll start with Tom Sidoris.
Hey, thanks. Tom Fligors, 15 Boston Neck Road. I really just wanted to, I know that this is not a something that you need reminding about, but I thought I'd emphasize it. Each time I've asked one of you guys about the school project, you defend it to me, and I'm persuaded often. But ultimately, the problem that I see is that the dynamics of a special election are much different than the dynamics of a general election, and that having a proposition pass at a special election means it actually has to be popular. It can't just slide by, and it especially can't just slide by if there is concerted opposition. And I think that has to remain central to your thinking about what is the right proposal to put forward here. I'm afraid that I wasn't able to attend the building committee meeting yesterday to hear what the new developments, the new options are. But I do think that it's worth bearing in mind that ultimately what we in this room think about it is less important than what voters can be persuaded to think about it. And I'd also like to emphasize that I think that the consequences of losing an election are actually maybe I want to caution people against undervaluing the effect of a loss. I don't think that means that. I think it means it will be that much harder to win an election the following year, even if it is a general election, and it also means that the construction costs will be higher. So I really do urge everybody to keep the dynamics of a special election in mind. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Kelly Piazza. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong.
Hi, Kelly Piazza, 25 Edmund Drive. I just had a couple of thoughts on basically the middle school plan. And I've been coming to a couple of the meetings, not all of them. I was on vacation, and one of the things that I find at a lot of the meetings is there's still a lot of information that is not known or being explained to the public. Like one of the questions that was brought up last night by Mr. Mullis was whether or not the school department was going to continue to keep Wickford Middle afterwards, because there's some complications if they give that up. And it was reported by Aaron that you were planning to keep it, but there's never been any information out there of, okay, so if you're going to keep it, what are you going to use it for? All these things are very important, again, with getting voters to be on board, is to know what all is going to happen. A lot of the questions like, where are all the Quid kids going to go if you demolish Quid? None of those questions have even been attempted to be answered in my mind. I might be wrong, maybe I missed something. But I also feel like a lot of this process has just being rushed in order to get the bonus money. And that was something that Mr. Jones yesterday brought up, is are we just chasing this money but maybe not coming up with the right plan that's right for the voters of this community, the kids of this community? One of the things that's been brought up is open classrooms. Open classrooms was in vogue in the 60s, 70s when everything was built. It was partly a cost-saving thing, partly because they thought it would be a great way of configuring classroom sizes. It didn't work, and now we're paying the price. I don't want for us to spend millions of dollars on a project that 5, 10,
30
20
seconds.
years down the line, we're going to be paying the price for. So I just think that rushing this to get this through for a November election may not be the right thing. And that's all.
Thank you. Next up is Pam Panero.
Pam Panero, 710 Slocum Road. First off, I wanted to welcome Dr. Duva to the district. I really appreciated his email the other day, making the school community aware of these important meetings this week, and that he would be following up with a summary. That's a great step towards improving communication and transparency. I went to the building committee last night. I was glad to see that there were two new options presented. That was great to see. I, however, was a little bit frustrated by the fact that it appeared as though some had an open mind about them and others did not seem to have an open mind. I felt that there were some folks who just had one thing set. I feel for me personally, I agree with her that we do not have a comprehensive plan at this point. There are so many questions and very few answers. And I know you've been waiting for Dr. Duva to come aboard, but he just came on board. It's a week. This is an opportunity to help heal the community and have a large project to bring us all together to kind of overcome the last few years with multiple struggles. You know, I have many reasons that I stay involved, but I just want you to think about this and the impact of the last few years on my family. My children are going to be in 8th and 6th grade. I have had 7 different principals of my children in just that short amount of time. There has been no consistency in this district. There's a lot of frustration because of that. And now we have this huge, big, important project. And I would really like to see the administration have time to really show some leadership, which I am very confident in only through word. I don't know you at all, but you have a good reputation, and I've taken other people's word for it. I would love to see the school committee step back and give the administration some time to put together a real plan. Dr. Duva mentioned a community survey yesterday. There was some done, which has been diminished. I participated in them, so I don't agree with diminishing that those who participated, it doesn't count. There were concerns of 2 middle schools versus 1. The busing. My child goes to school 6 miles away, and he's on the bus 50 minutes. Davisville Middle School or Quinessa is over 10 miles away. How long is my child going to be on the bus? I really would like the school committee to take a step back, take some time. This is a great opportunity to move this district forward, get us all on the same page, have some community feedback, give the administration an opportunity to shine, and rebuild some of the damage that has been done. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item of the agenda, and that is the superintendent's report.
Thank you. I don't have a large report for tonight, but I'll say in my past 7 days, I definitely have a good overview of the district, the needs and what I need to focus on with the administrative team and working with our community. I did just want to briefly say, last week met with the district administrators that were here. It was the 4th of July week, so some were out. But I focused on the direction we need to move on with the district as far as a leadership team, talking about valuations, talking about setting goals, making sure that the goals of the administrators are focused on the district strategic plan, making sure that we have connections between the district strategic plan and the school plans, and those are ways that we can focus on moving forward. We're going to begin planning an administrative retreat. We talked about that there should be time to really spend on team building. There are a lot of new people in the district or newly hired over the past year, and we need to have a focus on that as well. So there's that. Jumping in on the school building project, which is I would say a major priority of the district right now in the community for us to be working on, as well as just getting in and looking at systems and making sure that we have systems in place for the district. So there's a lot of different things I've identified to start working on with everyone. I do want to recognize a few employees that have retired in the district since April 1st. So if you don't mind, I'd like to go through this list and just recognize them for the amount of time, their years of service to the district. So the members that are retiring, it's a little bit of a long list, but I'm just going to go through it quickly. Patricia Kerwin, who is an ESL teacher, is retiring. She was an ESL teacher at Davisville Middle School most recently. Dr. Morse, who has been the principal at North Kingstown High School. Mr. McPeak, who was a special education teacher at the high school. The head clerk at Stony Lane, Mrs. Ward. Mrs. Carr, who had a few of my children at Stony Lane, retired as a first grade teacher. Mr. Varia, who is a high school social studies teacher at the high school. Mrs. Carlton, who was the art teacher at Stony Lane. Mrs. Cahill, who taught 6th grade at Davisville Middle School. The principal at Davisville Academy, Ms. Carolyn Garlick. Mrs. Hammersley, a teacher at North Kingstown High School for Family and Consumer Science. Miss Nakrovich, a teacher assistant at Stony Lane. Mr. O'Neill, teacher at Wickford Middle School. Ms. Close, social studies teacher at Wickford Middle School. Mrs. Marino, 3rd grade teacher at Forest Park, someone who I taught with back at Davisville many years ago, just recognizing a lot of people. School nurse teacher Alice Hamilton from Fishing Cove. Mrs. White, 6th grade teacher at DMS. Mrs. Pacino, teacher assistant at Quidnesset. Another person I worked with many years ago, Mrs. Buckley, who was the data clerk in the guidance office at North Kingstown High School. Ms. Lambert, teacher assistant at Davisville Middle School, and Ms. Carlson, a teacher assistant at Davisville Middle School. So those are many people that worked for the district over the years. I just want to recognize them and thank them for their years of service.
Thank you. I recognize quite a few names from when I was in school as well, so congrats to them, and thank you for doing that, and welcome officially to your first school committee meeting. We're very excited to have you. So we'll move on to routine items, and so the first one is to seal the executive minutes and disclose that there were no votes taken in today's executive session. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And then moving on to the consent agenda, is there any items that anyone would like to exempt from the consent agenda?
Can I exempt C1, D1, and D2?
Okay, so C1, D1, and D2. Any others? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda with the items B, 1, and 2, and then C2?
So moved. Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And then we'll go back to item C1. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve
C1.
the contract.
Yep.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Rob beat you to it. So we have a motion and a second on discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple questions on this one. So this is the second year this is before us, and like I said last year, I am really happy that this program is being implemented, and the fact that it's back before us means that it's successful, and I'm really glad about that. I have two questions. Last year, Lisa Hildebrand had requested that our district become creative in order to include this for the pre-K at Fishing Cove, and I don't know, Jody, are you back there? And at the time, Dr. Sapala had said that RIDE was offering training and that we might be able to make it work for the pre-K. Were we able? We were not.
We went with a different program.
We
Jody-
did. Okay. Okay.
If Jody, we just have to microphone.
Sorry, can you?
Well, why don't we direct it to Dr. Duba, and then if
Okay.
Dr. Duba wants to phone a friend, we can. I would probably move though. Do you mind if
I would
we?
have.
Yes.
I
Okay.
never come up there.
Thank you, Dr. Clark.
I believe that the preschool went with a different program. The name is escaping me right now, but they didn't go with the conscious discipline
Okay, but
option.
they did do something
They
along
did.
those same lines?
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
awesome. And is it, do you know whether it's like working there?
It is. I mean, this is kind of like a tier 2 and tier 3 intervention for that school. We are looking to overhaul our complete SEL programming. So
Okay.
we're kind of using this as a model moving forward to see how it's working at Quidnesset.
Okay, awesome. And then my second question was, the kids from Quid are all moving into Davisville. So what, is there a plan at Davisville to continue this conscious discipline program at Davisville?
So I will say, in a similar vein, we had restorative practices, and there were trainings that went on both at DMS, WMS, and the high school. So some of that type of modeling for behavioral infractions would continue in that work. It's a little bit different of a package program, but yet some of that would continue, yes, at Davisville, because teachers have been started to be trained.
Okay, and is there, is it like a full-on, because this is a really, like, the conscious discipline.
It is.
I mean, it's a full.
It's an intense.
test, and it's an intense, like, is it to that level?
It is not at this point.
It is not,
No.
okay. I'd be interested to see, hopefully next year, maybe some plans in place
Sure.
to do that, because I know this is really, you can see the benefit of this, and I'd love to see that expanded.
Dr. Duke and I have been talking, about our MTSS,
If I don't mind, jump in.
Go right ahead.
Discipline in different levels. So we use conscious discipline in Jamestown. We went and actually used some of the same trainers that I saw in this in the document. Thank you. We did the training K to 8. What we realized is that the philosophy around conscious discipline and a lot of the language and a lot of the programming behind it is really best for like preschool through elementary, not for middle school and
Okay.
up. So we did not continue with it at the middle school level, and we went with more of a restorative justice program and other SEL programs at our middle school level. Just the language and the focus is much more elementary. We did look at how conscious discipline really focuses on brain development and understanding behavior, and use that as kind of an umbrella training for all of our staff across the district. I don't know if I would, don't hold me to this, but I don't know if I would recommend conscious discipline at the middle school level.
Okay. But
As
something
a
along those
program
veins, yep.
to implement,
Okay.
as a tier, 1, tier 2,
Yep.
maybe as an overall training for staff, but I would go along with restorative justice program
Okay,
more for middle
awesome.
school.
I had one
High school.
question. Do you have more?
I just was going to say, the other thing too was I'd love to see expanded outside of Quid to the other elementary schools as well.
Sure. I think that consistency across the district is important.
Yeah, so that was my only question as someone new. I didn't see the contract last year. This was approved before I came on in December. I just was curious about why it was only at one elementary school and if we had explored the cost for expanding it and what that differential would be.
Right now, it's at 1 because it's being funded through Title I funds, and Quidnesset being our full title school, that's why it's receiving this. It was kind of like a supplemental in addition to our Open Circle program. It was seen as the additional programming that they would offer. But as we overhaul our MTSS for especially social emotional, we need to look at the entire K to 12 for our Tier 1 core instructional program around social emotional learning.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer.
Thank you, Dr. Clark.
Yes. Any other discussion?
No, that was it. I just wanted to.
Anybody else? Okay, hearing no other discussion, I'll call the question. So all those in favor of approving the contract, please say aye.
Right.
Aye. Okay, looks like the motion carries. Thank you so much. And thank you to Dr. Clark for that explanation. And looking forward to seeing what we can do in the future. And then the next item that we had exempted from the consent agenda was D1. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the administrative job description and salary as discussed in executive session. Any further discussion?
No, I just wanted to just call attention to the fact that, again, to thank Dr. Clark for the work that she's done, and just to touch on the fact that the job description has been revised to incorporate pieces of her job that had not been previously part of her job description before. We're making them permanent, and to thank her for the work over the past year. That was all.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I would echo what Ms. Lima said, and very excited that having that piece of grant writing and oversight is so important for district to be able to bring in opportunities for our students. So very excited that that is going to be part of this role. Okay. Recycling. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, D2. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so motion from Ms. Lima, second from Mr. Bridey. Discussion?
Just like to thank Dr. Mitchell for all of his work over the past few months and for agreeing to stay on, and that was it.
Thank
Can we
you.
make a friendly amendment to make that retroactive to July
Yes.
1, as
Or-
presented in executive session?
Yes.
Or instead of,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
maybe just withdraw your motion
I'll
and just
take my
restate it.
back. Right,
Yeah.
you go ahead. Yeah.
I was,
Yeah.
well,
Instead of having to
Yeah.
vote on the amendment and then whatever. So Ms.
Okay.
Lima withdrew her motion. You got that,
Yeah.
Jules? Okay, we're gonna have a new motion.
So make a motion that we approve the salary adjustment as presented in executive session retroactive to July 1st.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, can all those approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously, thank you. So that brings us to the end of the consent agenda, and so we'll move on to unfinished business. And so item A, we have a variety of policies that have come before us from the policy subcommittee that are coming back for either revisions, second reads, et cetera. And so I will turn it over to the chair of the policy subcommittee, Ms. Lima, to kind of walk us through these, and you can make the motions as you'd like. Jen, if you want to do one by one or whatever is most appropriate.
So all of the policies listed here, 1 through 8, these are all second read on the policies which are on the 620 agenda. They are all revisions except for the first one, policy ACB, which is a new policy, but again, a second read of that. Nothing has changed on these since they were presented at the last meeting, so what we're looking to do tonight is to approve them all as we saw them on the 20th. So I am going to make a motion to approve the policies as presented here. Can I get a second?
So we're doing them as a group. You want to do
I
them
would
as a
do
group?
them as a group, yeah.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table and a second from Ms. Lima and Ms. Hutchins, right? Jenny, did you hear that? Okay. So we're going to take these as a group unless anyone objects
Unless
to that.
everybody wants to.
Okay. Okay, so we'll open up for discussion. Any discussion on any of the second reads of the policies put forward? I did just have a question, Jen, about 7 and 8 as listed.
Yep.
Are those purposely different, or are they just repetitive?
No, one is actually policy
Yeah.
IJOCR, which is the regulation for it.
Yeah.
They are listed, the policies.
They're different in
themselves
our packet.
are
I
in
just
our
wanted to
packet.
make sure
Yes, yeah.
that people knew that there were two separate ones
Yeah,
there.
one is IJOC and one is IJOCR, which is the regulations. Yep.
But the attachments are correct, so
Correct,
I feel
yep.
comfortable moving
Yep.
forward with that. Yep. Further discussion? I just wanted to make a note about, or bring something up about the policy ACB that has been worked on. I wanted to thank both the policy subcommittee and then all the community members and members of the administration that came and gave feedback regarding this policy, as well as the district lawyers and the consultants that worked on it. It was definitely a lot of work to come up with this policy, but very, very important. And I just wanted to make a note that once we roll this out, and I know that this is already in the administrative's purview, but just wanted to kind of state it, is that, no policy is good unless there are good procedures and good trainings that go along with it. So I'm very grateful for those community members that took the survey that came out from the consultants that are going to be doing the trainings, and very grateful for them for doing the trainings on the policies to make sure that we're not just having a document that's living somewhere, but that we're going to actually be able to follow those procedures and make sure folks have good understanding of it. Any further discussion on any of the other policies? I have one other question. Just regarding the school building.
Yeah, I was gonna, after we approved it, I was gonna make a motion for the effective date for that. Is that what you were gonna ask?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not, I feel like you should pull that one then.
Okay, all right, so I'm gonna pull out.
Pull the whole motion and then just
Okay.
redo the ones with
Okay,
the
so
other
I'm going to
ones.
pull that motion, and I'm going to ask to approve 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so the original one with withdrawn, and then we'll do Lima and then Coyote for that one. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, so I'm hearing none. I'll call the question for 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously, and so those policies will go into effect, and we will get them updated on the website, and then we'll go back to A5.
Okay, so
Do you have a motion?
So for 5, I'm going to make a motion to approve with the note that the effective date for this one for for-profit rentals would be effective 9/1. That will give, we discussed that with the building people, and there are no current for-profit rentals booked prior to that date, so that will give time to roll the new policy out and not affect anybody who currently has anything booked. But for the nonprofit rentals, it would be effective immediately. So I'm going to make the motion with that date
That was the question.
in mind. Does that
Yep,
make sense?
so we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
And then separate motion for the current bill, right, separately for the bill.
I don't know what you're talking about, sorry.
For the community chorus. Separate motion for that? Yeah, because that's not related to the policy, right?
So, sorry, can you just expound on what is in
For the, and then separately, I want to make a motion that the bill that the community chorus incurred for their concert in the spring be waived,
Oh.
because they had come to us
Yep.
in November.
Yeah, because it took so long.
Because it took so long.
I would make a recommendation that instead of having the policy go into effect for nonprofits immediately, I would backdate it.
Backdate it? Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That would be my recommendation for the, where's finance?
Joe?
Sorry, hi. For the, if we retroed a policy, that would be the easiest way, correct? For the, do you want to explain it again, Jen?
So
What's the date of the community course
The community chorus concert was in May
of this year?
of this year.
Of last
correct?
fiscal year?
You said something about November. I was confused by that.
Well, they had come to us in November with this issue, but it took until now to get the policy approved. So I wanted to say, like, for them, for that bill, like, to wipe that bill out for them.
Right.
And Aaron's saying just backdate the policy to
To
that.
make sure they're covered.
Yes, yeah,
I think that's fine.
okay.
If anyone else is caught in between, we'll.
There, it's just them,
Okay.
yeah, so,
Yeah, so I would
I'm fine with
say
that.
March, or any backdated to
May 1st?
May 1.
May 1.
And are we going to adjust that in the policy? So in the policy, we have those dates, so when people read the policy, they know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we
that
would,
would be on page.
So we didn't meet for the first time until, they brought the issue to us in November. And then again in January, the policy subcommittee didn't meet for the first time until March, so.
So on page 7, where the rate table is, where it says fee schedule A and fee schedule B, we should put dates there as
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
those are going to go into effect.
Yep,
And add that to the policy.
yep,
yeah, so I think, so policy as written with the the change of May 1, 2023 for the
Actually,
non.
Ken, it doesn't change there because it's for this one particular group. The fees don't apply at all, so it doesn't.
That table doesn't
Yeah, the table
matter.
doesn't. The table doesn't apply to them.
Okay. But we're saying what's in the policy, we're going to retroactive some of the.
It's
any
going to be
input
that one
nonprofit.
clause is going to retroactively apply.
Yep, so let's be very clear about what we're changing, because we will be changing it like in the written form.
Yeah.
And so we are on the 5.
Is it number 3 under D? D3, is that where you would? I think it'd be D3, you want to put a date there.
Where it says.
Yeah, so I believe Dr. Duva is correct. So under D3, where it reads all North Kingstown community groups that are non-profit organizations as defined by the Internal Revenue Service, the school department is presented.
Under 3 where it says the school committee authorizes the use of
Yep.
school facilities right there. Yep.
Yep. And then so adding and civic organizations effective as of March 1, 2023 is the language that we'll be adding to
Yep.
that.
May 1.
May 1, excuse me, thank you.
Okay.
And then for the other part, on page
7 under the
Yep.
schedule.
I would probably say on page 6 where it says, you know how where C word G, it says fees
Yep.
for use, I would put it
Yep.
right there,
Okay.
effective
9/1.
9/1,
Okay.
2023.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. I'll
So
start
the
there.
committee clear on so we have the motion to approve that with these changes.
With those changes. Okay.
Any,
Do we need to issue a refund? Have they already paid the bill?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do not believe so.
Does Jules have where those changes are being made?
Jules, you got that?
I have the majority of them, and I'm going to listen back. I always listen back.
Okay.
Yep.
But I have the motion, and I know what you guys need.
Okay, perfect. The committee clear on the changes, just to make sure you all
Yeah.
understand the vote. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously with the revised changes to indicate the dates of effectiveness. Thank you. And thank you to the policy subcommittee and all the folks that worked on the different ones. And the policy subcommittee will continue to meet over the summer to continue to work through and updating policies. And we look forward to working with the new administration on them.
Yes, and one more note on policies. The policy subcommittee met yesterday, and the next time the school committee meets, there will be a list of policies that are going to be deleted or revised based on the fact that we just passed policy ACB.
Thank you. So moving on to the next agenda item, which is B, which is the update on the middle school project. Do we have a motion for discussion?
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay. So we'll open up discussion. I'll turn it over to Dr. Duva to kick us off. Actually, one quick question before we do that. Apologies. Did we want to do the building subcommittee report prior to Dr. Duva's presentation or
I would say, yeah, if you can,
Yeah.
if we move that up, what
Yeah.
we're going to discuss is a summary of what was talked about last night, as well as a little bit of that June meeting.
Yep.
So I think it would be good for us to provide that overview first
Yep.
before.
Okay, so I'll make a motion
and then,
to,
the same.
yeah, so they're the same, but like then we're gonna have a discussion, so I would say, I'll make a motion to move the building subcommittee report to the next item of business. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, so we'll move that piece up, and I believe that has to do, that will incorporate some of the presentation that we're gonna see. Mr. Bridie or Mr. Case, any additional information that you wanna provide in addition to what Dr. Dew is gonna discuss?
You want me to start?
So what I planned for tonight was just going to provide an overview of the wetlands discussion from the June meeting, and then jump into what we talked about last night. I have that slide deck to show, so that way the entire school committee sees that. But if there's something you want to,
No, it's fine. But at think the people who were here deserve to hear, what happened last night.
Yeah, so why don't we start with Dr. Dubra's presentation, and then if any members of the building subcommittee want to add any additional information as part of the report, we can do that. And then if the committee wants to have a conversation or ask questions regarding any of the information, we'll go from there. Does that sound like a good plan of order? Okay, so we'll start with Dr. Duba, and I believe someone is here from Jacobs, if I'm correct.
Yes. How can I
Make that
make this bigger?
hit close maybe on the, and then the little arrows maybe in the top right, like next to the little carrot. Yeah.
Right, we'll try that.
So Steve Nestorek, am I saying your last name properly?
You got it.
I got it.
correct, yeah.
Okay, so he is through Jacobs, one of our OPMs,
Yeah.
who works along with Inga. And Steve was able to join us tonight. Steve was also with us at the meeting. You weren't able to come to the meeting yesterday, but we've had many phone calls and meetings.
I've been a part,
since last
I'm
week.
a project executive on.
Oh, sorry, if you're going to speak with just the microphone, these don't pick up, unfortunately. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Steve Nestrak. I'm a project executive with Jacobs Project Management, and I've been working with Dr. Duba and others on the planning of these schemes. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. So Steve's going to jump in as we
Yep.
go through this.
Steve, maybe feel free to maybe take the seat closest to the mic. It might just save you a couple steps.
that's a good idea.
So I know the building committee met yesterday, but you also asked that we present on what happened at the June building committee meeting when it was discussed that there were additional wetlands that were found on the Quinnesset property. So this slide right here, this identifies the wetlands that were not identified during the master facility plan, but were identified through the environmental studies that Perkins Eastman did on the property. And prior to this study being done, this, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but the wetlands, the blue here, was known. However, the large area of wetlands right here and off to the right was not known. And so previous to knowing this, there were plans that were put in where the new consolidated middle school would be in this area and fields would be over here once Quinnesset was demolished. However, since then, with the studies that were done, the environmental studies and the desktop masking and the flagging of wetlands, it was discovered that there's this large area here of wetlands as well as here, which does pose limitations to the land and what can be done on this property. So knowing that, it was discussed to look at other properties, to discontinue any planning at the time of the Quinnesset site, and to see what other properties in town does the school department own that could be used to build the new middle school. And that is what we did previously to last night's meeting, and Perkins Eastman and the Jacobs team worked on that. And they presented two other options. It was also asked of us to look at, is it possible to keep two middle schools in town? And in considering that, we need to know, okay, well, what property and land do we have? What would the cost be of those two middle schools? And also what has already been allocated to the district for that, as well as the priorities. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, which hard to see from the side here. So this is the presentation that was provided to the building committee last night. I'm just going to go through that so the entire school committee sees this and look at the slides. I was going to pull a few, but as I pulled a few slides, it didn't really give justice to what we were looking at. So we asked Perkins Eastman to look at the Davisville Middle School site. We know that that is a property that we own. We know that it's a large property, and we asked them to look into this property and see, could this be used for one consolidated middle school for the district? We talked about other sites. It was mentioned to look at Stony Lane. Stony Lane will not be used. I don't want the community to think that that's the next site we're looking at. We looked at it to know what properties we have. Stony Lane property is not large enough to build a consolidated middle school nor one middle school. It's a narrow piece of property. There's issues with parking. You're not going to get fields. So it's not going to be looked at, but it was a property that we were told to look at. So it's not even up on here. The only other property that we had to look at was Davis Middle School. And so on here, this is the existing property. Over here, this is where McGinn Park is. Over here, where where the yellow colors are, we have the basketball court, we have the skate park, we have the tennis court, we have the new playground. Here are all of the fields. The fields are labeled A, B, C, D, and E. And those are the Little League fields, the baseball fields, softball, soccer, the JAG football we use as practice. So those are the current fields. Here's the current middle school that we have here. The yellow lines are the property lines. So right here, the yellow lines around DMS, that's the property that the school owns. Yellow lines going out around the fields and down to here behind the school, it's town property. It's property where the rec fields are. So we did talk last night that would be something we would have to work through with the town. And Mr. Mollis, as the town administrator, said he'd be willing to talk to us and work through that if this is decided as the best location and if this is what we put forward. So in doing so, we also know and notice that there are wetlands in this area that would have to be avoided, and there is a flood zone, and there's a cell tower. This white circle down over here, that's a cell tower, so we would have to make sure that any buildings that are built there's a certain distance you have to stay away from the cell tower if the cell tower ever fell. So that is something we need to be aware of in the building. The flood zones aren't a reason not to build there. Perkins Eastman has explained that they have experience building on top of flood zones. There's other steps you have to go through at raising the building. So it's not a site that you can't build on. There's just additional construction design that you have to go through that they have experience working on. So those are the concerns that we noted just by looking at the site maps that we have and the information that Perkins Eastman has on this site. It is a large space. It is on more of a main road than tucked in a neighborhood at Quinnesset. The next slide shows, let me see, so existing conditions. Let's see, what's the difference between that note there says this is the line of the wetland, so this blue line just outlines the area that we would have to make sure that we know that those are the wetland areas. And then this map shows the fields, just because we know there was discussion around the athletic fields and what fields that we have. So fields B and C would have to get relocated because that's the area that we would build the new middle school on. So in doing so, this is what the property could look like, right? This is a draft of looking at a preliminary plan. So this area here would be where we would build the new middle school. We would keep fields A, B, A, E, and D, and then fields B and C would be relocated where the building currently is. The building would have to be knocked down, and then we would rebuild those fields over there. So you're still getting all of the fields. There'd have to be a conversation that those town fields, rec fields, are now being used by the school department for the school team. So we'd have to work with the town as far as where else in town could there be fields to use. Mr. Mollis mentioned that there's Signal Rock. So there are other properties to look at and other parks that could be looked into to have to relocate the town rec fields if this property was used. The design of the new middle school would fit in with the educational programming that the building committee has been looking at. This back area here, that would be the academic wing. That would be where the classrooms are. So one of the challenges with building here, you would be looking at possibly a 3-story building, maybe a 4-story building. So there's a difference between having a 2-story building with classrooms and where students are versus a 3-story, and just the traffic flow, kids traveling from floor to floor, supervision of students throughout those floors would have to be discussed. there's more work that needs to be looked at this, right? So this is a preliminary plan. What we talked about yesterday at the meeting is that there's further studying that needs to be done on this property, just like we did at Knesset. We don't know if there's anything hidden on the land that would prohibit us from building here. So we would have to do further environmental studies. They would have to do a desktop review of looking at the information that is available to see where the wetlands are and make sure there's no other identified wetlands or environmental concerns on the property. They would also have to do wetland flagging, so a scientist would go out, the person would walk the fields, they would look at the characteristics of the land, characteristics of the plants that are out there to identify the different areas. And we'd also have to do the geo-boring on the ground to make sure there's no contamination anywhere. So that is further studying that would have to be done before we say, yes, this is something that we can use. And we want to make sure we do that before we go any further with this property. But it would provide the field space, the athletic fields that we're hearing that people want. It would fit one consolidated school with the educational programming. Any questions from the committee on this? And Steve, is there anything I missed that you would want to add, or Tom?
Not at this point.
Okay. So the
Dr. Duke?
yes.
I would just say that this scheme lays out really well based on the educational planning that Perkins Eastman did when they were focused on QUID. So all of the work that was done over that period of time on the educational planning, how to integrate into a separate, more intimate pod for 5th grade, all of that lays out very well on this site. And I would want to point out a couple of other details I think that are make this scheme very nice. One is you're taking a site for those existing fields that has very limited parking, meaning if you're in any of those fields, you've got to park on the school property and walk over. Here in this scheme, the parking is consolidated in the middle, so the school uses it at times, and then when school is closed and you're using the fields, you've got kind of centralized parking for that. So those two things alone. And the last thing I think Dr. Duba alluded to is we have not completed all of the verification of the wetlands and flood zones and what have you. The consultants had done a study for the district and the town back in 2017 that looked at the feasibility of this site. The only piece that wasn't in that scope of work was the environmental, and that's what we're coming back and saying, if you want to proceed on this, that would be the next step to validate this scheme.
Thank you, Steve.
And it looks like we wouldn't require swing space. We could still build the school while the Davisville still exists.
Yes. Right. So
Okay.
the school would be built. We talked about how you'd have to have safety precautions put in place because you'd have construction vehicles and workers around, so making sure that there are safety precautions between the current building here and what's being built over here. And so this shows the flow of traffic. So traffic coming into the school would come into the existing driveway and the school area. The construction would have to come in through McGinn Park and have access between McGinn Park to the building.
If I missed this, my apologies, but in order for this plan to work, we need to work specifically with the town council regarding ownership of so-called town land as opposed to school land. Is that correct?
You are correct.
All right.
Yeah, because I went back, Tom, I had that same question, because I obviously I sat in for Mr. Case last evening in the building subcommittee, and then afterwards I went back and looked at the original facility master plan, because this looks very optimistic, and I thought, why didn't we start here? And I went back, and I believe the reason that wasn't the original recommendation is when the facility master plan was done, it stated that this site is only 9 acres, because that is what the school department owns, and that's that area that Dr. Duber was showing us. And so this plan most certainly, to be successful, would have to have collaboration from the town, because that's where I asked that question last night of how many acres do we need to build a school of this size, and really the answer is approximately, I think they said 18 acres. And so that's where that differential comes from. And so, but to Dr. Davis' point, the town manager was definitely, I would say, positive about the possible conversations that could be had regarding those fields.
This was a breath of fresh air to see this plan yesterday. Notwithstanding the fact that we would have to, solicit the support of the town about gaining access to more acreage, but I just want to note, when I reviewed the master plan, this was deemed to not be feasible, and I think that was based on the assumption that we couldn't get, or that we wouldn't even consider seeking that extra land, which I think is primarily the football field area. And
it's all the fields. I
Okay,
believe.
all
I don't
right.
think it was deemed unusable, but basically it said that it was somewhat restricted by flood zones and wetlands, which this plan indicates, and that being adjacent to the McGinn Park, was the challenge. I think we were looking for more than 9 acres of land. So I think that's why at that time, when you look at how they draw it in the facilities master plan, it was just considering the land that we actually owned, which was the assignment at the time.
I understand.
Yeah.
But my point is that I find the master plan had been very frustrating because I find that it was misleading. We relied on it. I relied on it in the assumption that Quidnesset would be an appropriate location. This may be a better location, and obviously I think we should go forward. We made a motion about this for environmental testing last night, but in case any member of the public is wondering, why didn't you consider this in the first place? I just wanted to provide that context so that people understand why there has been a delay with this. So.
Yeah, I would also, Tom, respectfully disagree about the master plan. I think when you look at what the charge of the facility master plan was, it was to go through and do an assessment of all of the different buildings that we have, the needs that we have, point out opportunities, strengths, weaknesses, and different things. And obviously one of the biggest challenges was that we needed a middle school. That was the one that rose to the top. And then with the Quidnesset Elementary site, I think it was very transparent that there were wetlands and that it needed to be assessed. And until you do the type of work that we just did, you're not going to know the breadth of that. And so similar to the Quidnesset site, the Davisville site could produce similar results. This is what we're looking at right now. They're nodding. Jacob's is nodding. What we're looking at right now is what we were looking at with Quid. And so I would just like to defend the master plan. That's what the document was. It said, look at this one first. We did. It definitely reduced the acreage that was available. And so I'm hopeful that won't happen at the other sites that Dr. Duber is presenting to us. But I do think that the plan did what it was supposed to do, which is help you identify where to start. We can disagree on it. I just want to make my
I think we do disagree.
Yeah.
I respect what you're saying, and you've been very clear that you feel the master plan accomplished what it set out to do, and I get that. I don't remember seeing any caveat when I reviewed the plan that said we don't know about this, and I believe there were representations that Davisville was not going to work, and that Quidnesset was a better choice. In fact, I thought that last year when it was first presented to the school committee, when you and I were merely attending meetings. And my purpose here isn't to get into a big fight about the master plan. My point is I think the community needs some understanding of how we got to this point. And, we don't need to belabor it any further. But I get what you're saying, Erin.
Did you want to?
Yeah, I can go on to so this was what we reviewed as location for one consolidated school. And the next slides are looking at the possibility of keeping 2 middle schools in the district and building 2 new middle schools and looking at the property that we have to do so. So we started off looking at the current Wickford Middle School property. We know that Wickford Middle School is a historic building. We talked about that last night. Ms. Damalis brought up that with some work and working with the Historic Society, If a school is being built on this property, then Whitford Middle School could be knocked down, and correct me if I'm wrong with saying that, but it seemed as though that was something that we could.
Yeah, I'm not sure the
It's-
technical nature of it, but it
Yeah,
did
we
seem
need
that
to
the
look,
building
it's
could be
something we need to
removed. Yeah.
look, in. It was
Yeah, I'd
something
like
we
to
could look
see that
into.
confirmed.
We need to get it in writing. I mean, we definitely need all that documented first, and then have that in writing to know that for sure. But if we use this property, currently, right now, Whitford Middle School is over here on the right-hand side. We have the fields that are located over here, softball fields, the baseball fields, and then the athletic field that is used here. We know that there are wetlands and flood zones behind the school. Behind the school, there is a slope. There's other homes and properties. So the land that we have that can be used at Whitford Middle is only this land that is within the yellow lines over here of the property lines to be used. So we talked about, could we build a new middle school on the fields here? And that is what this is showing. So this is not a consolidated school because we already looked through that, and this property doesn't fit one consolidated school plus the fields. But if we built a smaller school, now in building two new schools, the square footage amongst the two schools do increase. The square footage of the consolidated middle school was 180 square feet for 1,200 students.
180,000 square feet is the consolidated school.
And then if we build two separate middle schools, both 5 through 8, the combined square footage was 245,000 square feet.
That's correct. That's the gross square footage.
So the square footage does grow with building two middle schools. You're going to have, because you'll have a gym, a cafeteria, there's double the space because you need that in each building. So this property would have a middle school that would fit 600 students. You would have space for the gym, for the cafeteria. Over here is where the classrooms would be. So that would be, I think it says 4 stories. Right? That would be a 4-story area, just like we talked about at the DMS site possibly. And then looking at where fields would go, we don't have a lot of location here to build additional fields. It won't fit, no matter how you place it. We looked at it to fit baseball fields, softball fields. So you would have an athletic field, and then parking would be over here to the side where the current softball field is. So they're looking at this plan, if this property can be used, and we also talked last night that there needs to be further studies on this property as well, because we need to know if there are any environmental concerns in the field area. So the same work that we would have to do at the Davisville Middle School site would also have to be done at the Whitford Middle School site. And looking at making sure there's no other wetlands, there's no contamination in the fields, that this property can be used to build a school on. So that work would have to be done. And if this is buildable land, we would also have to talk about that we don't have the space for all the athletic fields, and what are we prioritizing and looking at as far as educational programming for our students as we build new middle schools in the district.
And if you don't mind, Dr. Duba, I would just add, obviously, if Davisville can accommodate a consolidated school with the 5 existing fields, and some of those being improved or enhanced, having a small middle school at Davisville is pretty easy, right? You'll probably have more fields, more parking there. That's the plus side. On the Wickford, as the other middle school site, this scheme is quite constrained when it comes to the fields, and we haven't, again, the educational planning done to date was assuming a consolidated school and all that layout, so to be some additional work required there that we have not yet done or pursued. Again, to try to keep the 2 middle schools in terms of equity on educational programming, space planning, as well as the sports fields or athletic fields. But Wickford would not hold all of those athletic fields, in addition to the comment about the square footage and some of the cost.
email we received this afternoon?
Do you want me to do the next slide, Tucker, or the
No,
next one?
go ahead. Go ahead
And then
and
we
do
can
it.
bring-
Yeah, that's fine.
And so then the other option is looking at the Davisville Middle School site and building a new school there as well for Davisville Middle School. Obviously, the same challenges that we outlined earlier with the wetlands, the flood zones, the cell tower, that there's property there that belongs to the town, so we'd have to work along with the town, with them giving us that property to build the school. But you would build, again, a smaller middle school on the property in that same location. That would be for 600 students, and you would still have to relocate the fields as we mentioned earlier with one consolidated school. But obviously, this property would work for one new middle school. It could work for a consolidated school if we after doing the environmental studies know that this land can be used and that the town is willing to work with us on giving us the property where the fields are to build on. So there is a slide of side by side of looking at the options and the pros and cons that we did talk about. I know someone raised the concern about transportation. Obviously, that's a concern, and we'd have to look at the bus routing of having one consolidated school on the north end of the island. Sorry about that.
Big
You crossed the bridge.
Not in Jamestown, on the north end of town versus the and having to transport all the students on the southern end of town. So that is something that we'd have to look at and be an additional study we have to do through our administration, looking at transportation and bus routes and knowing what those times would be. That's obviously something that has to be looked at.
I do have to say, though, that the Davisville site for a consolidated middle school compared to Quinnesset for the southern, I mean, that'll cut 5 miles off that commute. It's not as far as Quinnesset.
So, do you want to mention?
A large topic of conversation last night was that if we pursue 2 schools, that it means more expense, well beyond the $167 million bond that we've got presently scheduled on a ballot. The estimate from the architects, I don't remember it specifically, but it was going to be well in excess of that. This afternoon, Mr. Mollis forwarded an email that had apparently been sent by Mr. Carreno, I believe, from RIDE.
Yes.
That said you can build 2 smaller middle schools, substantially smaller than this option, smaller than option B, rather than each school being about, I think it was 133,000 square feet.
103.
130?
3.
Okay.
103.
For the one this afternoon. This one is 122,000 square feet for each of the schools?
No,
Is that
it's
correct?
Yes.
It is?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay. Obviously, I've never seen that email before, and I just want to know where did that come from, and do you have any information as to what Mr. Carreno was basing those calculations on?
I do not know how he's basing his calculations. I know he does state in the email that from RIDE's perspective and what they would allow for reimbursement, it would be 2 new 600-student middle schools, which is based on our projection of enrollment of middle school students in the district at that time, and that each one would have to be less than 103,000 square feet per the RIDE regulations. And I believe that's to meet any reimbursements from them. If we go over, then we wouldn't be reimbursed for the entire project. You're building more square footage for 2 middle schools versus having the 1 middle school. And he gave in his email saying that it's an estimate of $85 million for each school to be built. But talking with the architects, they don't believe that would be enough money, and that's basically taking the 85 is kind of splitting the amount of money that we have allocated for the project.
It just seems to me that the figures that are in that email this afternoon are extremely optimistic about what the expense might be, and
I read it a little different, but I would defer to the.
If I can comment, I think what I did not see the email, but we did have a discussion about it this afternoon. And I think that email is a reference to what RIDE would reimburse towards a school, not trying to say you can only build a school of that size. And so I think my comment to Dr. Duba when he was reading the email earlier today is really part of RIDE's formula when you don't consolidate a school, because you don't get the economies. But I think our architects, again, who have been here with you over that educational planning, laying out the schemes, knowing the size of a typical cafeteria, gym, so on and so forth, is pretty confident that each of those buildings would have to be somewhere between, say, 118 to 122,000 square feet. Again, we also caveated we'd have to go back if it's a two-school and kind of, dial it in, so to speak. But it's going to fall probably in that range. The second point I would make to the cost assumption is all of the work that Jacobs and Perkins Eastmans were a part of on this educational planning and focused on QUID was one consolidated schools. And so the estimates and everything that got to the council meeting and the debate on $160 million as the cost was based on one school. And I think our experience, at least amongst the project management team and also with the architect, is that when you start building two schools, you're going to have more square footage, which is more cost. And we really haven't, when someone throws out a number, we haven't reconciled that back to the details of that specific project. Like, what was your site like? How much wetlands did you have to move or build walls or raise the podium of the finished floor? So those are really important details, because we're not taking the school and just parking it on a nice, flat, empty field next door. None of that's been vetted.
We are willing to take a nice empty field. If anyone has 18 acres in town, I've been saying that very viciously, that we're very open to that.
I would just comment, Davisville is about as close as you can get to a good site at any school district that, is built out as your district is.
And I just want to make clear, in case anybody, our viewers at home are listening, if we were to pursue a two-school option, there will be built-in inequity in terms of what the facilities are. Wickford is not going to have the space, and it's not going to have the athletic facilities that Davisville would have, even at a 600-student school, much less as a 1,200-student school.
Right.
So we would literally be building two schools where one might be perceived as better than the other one. Is that correct? I mean,
well, I think it's obvious from the schemes. If you look at it, you have a consolidated middle school or a middle school of 600 students surrounded by beautiful athletic fields, all for their use. Look at Wickford, you basically got a multi-purpose field or maybe a ball field at best. So that's just on the outside.
right.
What's inside would also probably be challenging if we're going to try to keep to the same budget, which I think our recommendation is if we go to the two-school scheme, we should start to think about how the funding and the budget would work under that scheme. But it's too premature because we really haven't completed the environmental work, and we haven't completed, Dr. Duva's been here, about a week, his input on the educational plan to split that into two.
Thank you.
So that's what was shared last night. It led us to have a conversation of moving forward and asking the school committee for approval to do further environmental studies at both the Davisville Middle School site and the Wickford Middle School site, so that way we know, is this land buildable? Is it worth us moving forward in developing plans on either of these sites? And the question is, do you go with two middle schools versus one? But we're just to put out there seeing that if you go with two middle schools, one middle school is going to have more opportunities than the other based on fields. And I know there's concerns with only having one middle school and less opportunities for students about athletics. But I think those are conversations we have to have and prioritize what's most important in providing 21st century learning environments for our schools, and the focus on with the buildings and the fields and what we can provide to the students in our town, and also looking at what properties we have to build on and staying within the allocation that we have, and knowing that we need to put a viable plan in front of our community prior to the bond.
One thing that was mentioned last night, and when we get to the point, once the presentation's done, I will make a motion based on what happened yesterday, or Tom can. But what was encouraging, though, about the Davisville site that they did not have at the Quinnesset site is the Davisville site is more developed, and so as they mentioned, there has been studies on it recently. Like at Quinnesset, there was a lot of unknowns because that 26 acres, a lot of it was undeveloped, whereas Davisville is much more known. And so that was something that was optimistic to me when listening to them and going on and doing further studies, et cetera, is that they anticipate less surprises as it has been kind of looked at and developed over time, which was encouraging. Any further information?
The only other thing that's important to note that's been talked about, and I don't remember if this came up last night, that Davisville Middle School, also just thinking of the building itself, there has been some work done over the past 10 years. So a new roof was put on Davisville Middle School about 10 years ago, and more recently, new windows and new exterior doors. So you just want to consider that there has been renovations done on Davisville Middle School. So before a decision is made, I think we also need to just weigh out what costs we've already put into that school, and then if in 4 years or so it's going to be knocked down. I just think it's important to have that conversation because someone's going to raise that.
And I think that is part of, we have had some of those conversations, and also thinking about what could be repurposed, what could be utilized in other facilities, et cetera, with the director of facilities. But then also thinking about, continuing to work through this project as we have had different changes and things. Because I think that is one of the biggest things that was a concern for me coming in is when we were looking at the facilities master plan and different things, we were also knowing that we have the CIP plan and the immense amount of costs and work that needs to be done at Wickford. And do we want to, as a district, to continue to invest in that facility, knowing that it is beyond its lifespan, knowing that it's going to be more difficult to finance repairs, et cetera, on that building, as is unlikely we'll get 50 more years of educational usage out of it. And so that's another, I think, consideration is kind of if we don't move forward with a new plan and a new school, like what we need to do to make sure that our students are okay in the meantime, or okay until we, move forward. And so that's something that's high on my mind as well, is not investing additional money into buildings that really have been past their prime, which have been very public about. Wickford Middle School in my mind is unfixable at this point, in my mind, to be a good facility for our students.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Of course.
Kind of on the heels of what you just said. So the email from Mario at RIDE, that's because we're looking at the bonus for newer and fewer, right? But there's also a bonus for replacement. So if Wickford does have those issues, so is he just considering option B in terms of consolidation, or would that option also then be eligible for additional reimbursements through that bonus for its replacement of a facility that has a facility condition index of 65% or higher?
Yeah.
And it's still a 5% bonus.
Right, and I think we also have to have the discussion of what's going to happen with our elementary schools, because when we were looking at the Quinnesset site, that was a site Quinnesset was going to close, so then you're also going to redistrict students, so you're also going to have less elementary schools. So that's still part of this plan, because we're saying it's going to be a 5 through 8. So I think that's all considered. And I know in the conversation with Mario from last week, we were on a call with Mario on Friday morning with Jacobs and Perkins Eastman, he pretty much said, just focus on 2 plans, kind of what we're doing. One plan, you have a consolidated school, and another plan, you have 2 new middle schools. And look at and see what can you do. And from those 2 middle schools, from those two plans, choose one plan. So my impression from that meeting with Ride from Friday morning wasn't that Mario was trying to push us in one direction or not, but to say that just focus on two plans, take those two plans, decide what plan you're going with, and put that out as the plan that you're asking to put in place, and that's what you're going to use the bond.
But to your point, there are lots of different ways to get to 55% reimbursement. And, you know, I think for me, that's another big piece of this is I completely agree with the citizens that made the comment that we don't want to make decisions that are that we're going to be like, wow, I can't believe we did that in 50 years. As a lifelong resident, I remember when we built the high school, I was in the old school, but, you know, and so I want to make sure that we're making the good decisions. But we do have an opportunity, and I think, you know, with where we were planning-wise with the facility master plan from 2022 and the work that had been done since 2018, you know, and then working, now that Dr. Duba's here, being able to have some of those conversations that we wanted to make sure to include our new administration in about redistricting and different things. I think, you know, for me, I'm open to whatever the best option is for the district, and however we can get to the highest amount of reimbursements, because that's such a huge opportunity for us. And Newer and Fewer is one of them, but I don't think renovating the facilities is probably the choice to get us to the highest level of reimbursements based on what we were hearing from Perkins Eastman and Jacobs on just like the cost of renovating a facility of that age is just probably going to be more expensive than completely building a new facility. So that's kind of where I think we were leaning more towards going for some of the other reimbursements to try to get to the 55% versus that one.
Dr. Duba, how costly are the environmental studies?
So we did get an estimate today. I was working, and Steve was on that call as well. So the estimates are no more than 50,000. So that's what they told us. So somewhere around 18 to around 25,000 would be for the desktop review, as well as the the flagging of the wetlands, and that's for both sites. And then you have to add in the geoboring. So the recommendation that was given to me today from Perkins Eastman and with Jacob's team is to request from the school committee that we allocate no more than or up to $50,000 for those studies to be completed on both pieces of property. And
So I think
they
my
believe it'll
concern
come,
is,
it'll
that
come
we're gonna spend-
under 50,000, but
We're going to spend all this money on finding out if Wickford is and what it is, but looking at it, it is so inequitable between the two schools that I think you'll have a hard time passing a bond.
That's my question.
Looking at that,
Yeah.
like my children went to Wickford and they have fields now, and to take those away and give them one field and then look at the other school that would have 5, I think that inequity. So do you look at the Davisville site first? Or,
Yep. So Tom, do you want to let the committee know what the recommendation? So the building committee voted and had an official recommendation to us, and then we obviously can make a motion and work through what we want to do. But to your point, Jenny, do you want to let them know, Tom?
Just by way of history, I made a motion after the discussion that we pursue testing at Davisville. Basically recognizing what I think you recognize, that Wickford is just not really all that viable, I don't think. There was some pushback from members of the committee, members of the Public Works Department. To a certain degree, I think Mr. Mollis, they wanted to pursue testing at both sites, suggesting what's the harm in that. So I amended the motion because I had professionals who were telling me, we think you should look at both of them. And that's the motion that passed. It is a recommendation to this committee. It is not a requirement, and I think we can do with it whatever we please. But and I'm not trying to minimize what these folks said. They were acting in good faith. They want to pursue something at Wickford as well as with Davisville. But it's really hard for me to envision a situation where we would pursue 2 schools. at this point. And it is expensive to do this testing. $50,000 is nothing to sneeze at.
And we have to remember, every dollar we spend now, it's going to end up being less that we are taking off of the top of what we are putting into the schools. But also, look at it as if we don't do the testing, we don't know.
I'm not supportive right now of putting any money into the Wickford site. I mean, it is clear by looking at that. I mean, I know me personally at the Quinnesset site, once I heard that there was no room for fields there, that became an unviable option for me. So to look at Wickford and say you can't put a field there, it's an unviable option for me. So to put any money into testing that right now when we have what is potentially a viable site at Davisville, it's not prudent for me to say, let's put another 50 grand into Wickford right now. If they go into Davisville and they discover, like at Quid, it's got a river full of wetlands through the middle, then we have to regroup. But, we're already operating on, we're trying to be cognizant of the money that we're spending. It doesn't, I understand it would be great to know what we were looking at for Wickford for, potential future, but right now it doesn't make sense to me to look at both for right now. I wouldn't be supportive of doing both at the moment. I would support doing the testing at Davisville.
So that estimate for the testing, is that 50,000 total for both sites or 50,000 per site?
It's 50,000 total for both sites.
So it would be
If I can just clarify, because this is, we're trying to make sure we're being judicious of how we spend the district and the town, or the district's money. So if you look at the Quid site, the budget to do a full environmental impact site assessment, of which maybe a third roughly was completed to get to the part where we did the wetlands mapping and it knocked it out, right? We probably, on the next site, let's say it's Davisville, we'll probably have to spend another 50 to 60 to do that same complete environmental site assessment. Understanding that going into last night's meeting, we weren't sure whether both sites were going to be advanced. And so the estimates that we provided Dr. Duva that were somewhere between 25 and 50,000 was for both sites. But they weren't a complete environmental assessment for both sites. It was to do what's been referred to as a desktop review and some selective field investigations. Again, this is supplemental to what we know about the sites based on the 2017 study that you already paid for, right? So we don't want to repeat stuff you already know and paid for. So that's an option, is to move forward, continue to look at both sites, desktop review, some field surveys, but just so we were perfectly clear, if you then said, okay, now we want to go to this site or that site, there's probably another 25,000 roughly to finish the work in order to submit that to RIDE. Or you could say, I'll take the 50,000 and I'll apply it to one option or the other. I hear Davisville. And that would take you further in the information path on that site, and you kind of set Wickford aside for the moment. So that's kind of the two options that I see them, and we were just trying to be flexible. But whether we do one or both, we want to be thoughtful at every step as we proceed, because if any point in time something isn't making sense, then we can just stop and not spend any more money. Very similar to what we did at Quid, right? We didn't spend 60,000 of your money. We stopped at, about a third of that and said, okay, we know enough. Don't proceed. Does that make sense, I hope? Okay.
I think too, when I think about one consolidated middle school versus two, I saw the email from Mario at RIDE, and then I also have built buildings before, and I know anytime you go up in square footage, you go up in money. Like, it's just that simple. And I think the numbers that they provided as far as what it would have to be to build two facilities, like, that would be lovely. I just don't think our town's debt ceiling can handle it. I don't think that it's realistic. And so knowing that Wickford cannot hold the large school, which would have been ideal, but we always knew it couldn't because of the amount of size. Like, I also have pretty big concerns about investing any of the school department's money in looking into that. With that said, just to clarify what I said yesterday is we haven't had those long-term strategic conversations, what we will, now that Dr. Duva is here, about, you know, what we will do with the Wickford Middle School building and facilities. One option is for the school department to retain it and utilize it either for another school down the line or administrative buildings or who knows what, or the other option would be to turn it over to the town. But we wanted to wait for Dr. Duva to kind of have those larger strategic plan conversations, which we most certainly will start having now because we want to be able to provide that information to the voters when they're making the decision. But we definitely wanted to make sure Dr. Duva was on board for that. And so with all that said, I think, you know, if money was no object, it would be nice to know what we're dealing with at Wickford. But I do have concerns about, in this project, in this money, investing that additional, what it sounds like to be $25,000, because to Dr. Duva's point, anything that we spend, if the bond passes, like that's just money that's $25,000 that isn't going to go into the new facility.
It's not going to go into the library. It's not
Yeah.
going to go into the art room, right?
Yeah, and so I have concerns about that. To Jen's point, like if Davisville Middle School, if there's something unforeseen and it comes up and we need to then do additional testing at different places, that's kind of the next step in the process, unfortunately. But looking at the square footage and what they could fit at the Wickford site, like it's not even close to what we need. And again, one of our goals in this project is to create equity for the middle school age children, and that would not be doing it. No. So we have the recommendation from the building subcommittee that we do that kind of desktop. Did I get it right? Desktop testing at both sites.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because this is the first time we as a body have met since any of the building subcommittees have met. Has the work at Quinnesset been stopped?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we make a motion to
can I just
move forward with option A for inputting the money?
Yeah, that's what we would need to do. So if we wanted, as the school committee, we need to give the direction to the administration and to the folks. So we would need a motion. But to Jen's point, yes, we haven't. This is the first time that we've met. The building subcommittee met twice since we have met, and we also spoke with the town council for their request once before the school committee received this information. And so I know a lot of us watch the meetings and different things, but this is the first time we've officially seen this. One question I did have regarding the Quid site, and if you don't know it off the top of your head, is I know originally that was 26 acres. Obviously, with the environmental studies, that got reduced. Do we know what the developable acreage there is?
It was 17 or 18 acres, roughly.
I think it's close to
I
seven.
asked
It's 17, and I know the right-hand side of the wetlands is about 5 acres, and we were about an acre to an acre and a half short to accommodate fields. And then the other, whatever the math is, 12 acres was basically what was needed just for the building.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at Wickford, I can get you those figures. We did have them. I don't know if they made it to the final print on the slides, but Wickford was about an acre short, just in what we would wanted for the building. And Davisville was about spot on, assuming, again, taking in the Parks and Rec land.
Okay, thank you for that. And I know there was the other request, and I don't know if this has happened yet, is one of the things that we have been trying to do is make sure that we have any information that we have available to the public. And so I don't know if the presentation that was presented at 2 building committees are up, and then this one I'm sure will go up, but will go up on the website for the facilities.
I'll make sure that everything
I
is
think
there.
it's already up.
All right,
Yeah,
The one that was, the old Quid, all the Quid stuff is up on the site.
All right.
This is about to be posted.
This one needs to be
Perfect,
posted.
thank you. So we are under discussion right now so we are in a motion discussion, so if someone did want to make a motion to move forward on any of the different pieces that we have had conversations. We know the building subcommittee recommendation is the 2 doing some of that desktop exploration. We obviously can take that into consideration in our decision. So whoever wants to put forward a motion, you are welcome to do so. If no one wants to, I'm happy to.
You want to do that?
I mean, I'll make a motion that we move forward with doing the environmental studies on the Davisville site.
I'll second that.
Up to 50,000?
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Not to exceed 50,000?
Not to exceed
Okay.
50,000.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for the Davisville Middle School property. Further discussion on this motion? I just wanted some clarification regarding if the administration had any sense of where that funding would come from at this point. I know, obviously, if the bond passes, all of the money and the work that we're doing will be part of the bond and reimbursable, but just wanted to know it kind of at the upfront where the funding would be coming from for the additional studies.
Isn't this part of the
Isn't
money
this part
that
of
we
what's
approved?
left over from quid?
That's my question.
Oh, okay. I just assumed.
No! Just want to ask Dr. Duba so people understand what's going on.
So my understanding is that at a previous meeting, you agreed to allocate $850,000 for work, but that was not this work. Because it was $850.
So the
So
original
this
request
is-
from Perkins Easton was $1.7 million. The school committee at a previous meeting had concerns regarding that and wanted more information about our FY23 fund balance and available resources for the district. And so at a couple of school committee meetings ago, we had issued up to $850 to begin the work of that overall 1.7. And so I guess the question is the price tag now 1.7, 50,000, for a lack of a better way to say that
Right.
number? Or is it,
Part of
is that part of that? Yeah.
I'll answer it in two parts. The first part is the approval for the 850 we've proceeded on, and as I just described, just one element of that 850, which was a full environmental site assessment, that work was stopped about halfway through. So is that enough to cover the full 50? Not quite, but clearly the architecture team didn't pursue, they haven't spent anywhere near the full 850. So those money are fungible. So if you apply it as the motion on the table, 50,000 towards environmental, wetland, some site assessment work for Davisville, then it's going to be within probably the 850. But then if we move forward, we'll have to rebalance again that 850 to whatever the appropriate number is. I don't have that answer, but I think we can work through that in the next few days. Does that make sense? Because it is a little confusing because we shifted sites,
Yeah.
and it was very easy to estimate cost and time frames on quid, and we should have an accounting. Dr. Duba asked again today to get that accounting done this week, so we have that on what we did spend, the balance, and then this 50 would be within that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional discussion?
Well, I'll just, I amended that motion last night, but I continue to believe that option A is the viable alternative here. So I'm going to vote in favor of this. But I just wanted to make that clarification because I did amend my request during the middle of last night's meeting. So.
Any other discussion? If you have anything else that you want to?
No, I don't.
All right, hearing none, I'll call the question. So the motion on the table is to approve, kind of within the money that we had approved before, work to be done to do the environmental study at Davisville Middle School site, which we heard will not exceed 50,000. And we had a motion second. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. And so we will all cross our fingers and hope that it goes great.
Do we have a timeline on that?
We're going to have that desktop piece of that scope of work done in about 2 weeks, and then we hope in a 4-week time frame we can have all of the if we decide after that 2-week analysis to move forward with some site work, the wetlands mapping, and that it's about a 4-week schedule timeout. So I think by next month's meeting we'll have a pretty robust update on Davisville.
Will that 2-week purely desktop thing give a yay or nay, or will it be?
It will.
I guess will it give a nay?
It will cover kind of the big rocks, no pun intended. But we're still, a part of that effort, there are two key elements in my mind that weren't picked up in the 2017 study. One is a site visit by the wetlands people, and two, the town interviews.
Okay.
So we did that on Quidesset. It needs to happen here.
Okay, thank
right?
you.
Because and then from there, we'll say, okay, we spent $18,000 for that effort. Now we got to spend the balance of that 50 for site work, geotechnical, and things like that. That will take us out 4 to 6 weeks. We'll have that update for you next month.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, because that's something that I brought up is that, as we're working through the plans, like we most certainly have heard, I think, from the community of things that they are concerned about and then things that they want answers to. Obviously, transportation being one. If there's any impact on redistricting, which might be, if we went, this site obviously has a different impact, and then, the usage of the buildings that we would be vacating, et cetera. And so, I think with hearing how the work that needs to be done can be done on the site and that they're optimistic about it, like it still keeps us on pace of getting, in my mind, I would like to have a very clear, very solid plan to the community, like by September. Like this is what you are voting on, this is what we're doing, and so hopefully we'll be able to kind of stay on track with that timeline to make sure that the community has a lot of time before they need to make a decision on this to be able to have that information.
Just a clarifying question, sorry. Did the 50,000 that we just approved, is that inclusive of the 850 or is that on top of the 850? Inclusive of, okay, thank you.
And our plan will still be to do like a public forum, right? With
Oh,
people to
yeah.
ask questions and everything. Yep, okay.
Did the building subcommittee, regretfully I couldn't attend last night, did they say let's meet again in 2 weeks?
So we do. We have a meeting scheduled for July 24th.
I could be wrong.
26.
26.
Thank you.
Thank you. Five? I think it's at 5.
It's July 26th at 5 o'clock.
Okay. Okay, so we have other items on our agenda, so we'll move on. Thank you so much to Dr. Duba, and thank you from the representative from Jacobs, and for the conversation, and of course the building subcommittee who spent a lot of time working through and talking about this topic. And so we're going to move on. Are you?
Oh, it's just.
Okay, sorry. I didn't know if it was like
breathing oxygen into my body.
No worries, oxygen is good. So we'll move on to new business. And so item A, we are actually going to table. We're actually going to hold a very, hopefully quick additional meeting this Friday, just because we unfortunately had a brief typo on this, and it says under new business for discussion only, and we want to be really transparent with the community. Our intent was that it would have said for discussion and possible action, but unfortunately does not. And so to be in compliance with the Open Meetings Act, we're going to table item A and likely hold a special meeting on Friday to do that. So apologies on that. And so that will bring us to, do I need a motion to table it?
I'll make a motion.
All right, so we have motion table.
Second.
We have second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we will make sure to post that as we do with all of our meetings. And apologies to the folks in that contract. And so moving on to the second item of item B, which is the school improvement plan. Can I get a motion for discussion?
I'll make a motion to discuss.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay. And so we'll open that up, and I'll turn over to Dr. Duva to kind of walk us through this process and the school improvement plans. Dr. Duva?
So I'll start. Dr. Mitchell's here as well, so that way he, as you know, he's the interim assistant superintendent, so he has been doing some work along with Ms. Nadi, and he was here previously to me, stepping in and working with the principals on this plan, so he's going to add in as we go. You have copies of the school improvement plans in your packet. I just want to kind of just give a brief overview of how the Education Accountability Act has changed, and being a new law in place for the state, and what within that law that we have to follow as a district.
So there have been changes to the school, how school improvement plans, district improvement plans, as well as school improvement plans need to be written. There's a specific framework from the Rhode Island Department of Education that must be followed, and there were timeline requirements put in place. So as you know, the district plan had to be written, and so that was presented to you and had to be submitted to the Department of Education by June 1st. And that plan had to include the priority areas, the goals. Each goal had to have initiatives and action plans to meet those goals, and the plan is for 3 years. That plan, once that plan was submitted by June 1st, the schools then had to rewrite their plans that would be in alignment to the district plan, following the frameworks from the Department of Education, and that had to be reviewed and submitted to the Department of Education by July 1. The plans do need to be consulted with school committee, and that's what, we are sharing that now. We know that they had to be in by July 1, which is timeline-wise, and we know that changes in staffing and interims and whatnot, that unfortunately was not presented to you by July 1. But we know RIDE wants to work with all of the districts, right? They're not out there to say, gut share on something. So any changes that we are looking to make, any improvements in these plans, these are working documents, we can do so. I did review the plans. I've had conversations with Bob as well. I've been in touch with all of the building principals as far as my vision of where I want to see the district go with implementing the plans. So what you have in front of you, I would expect to possibly see some additions to. Not saying there's anything wrong with, there's nothing wrong with the plans, but we need to come together as a team, right? We have new administration in place. We need to meet as a district with the principals, with the school, eventually with the school improvement teams, and really discuss these plans. I shared with the principals and with other district directors that I envision that we have a district plan. All of the school plans should be aligned to those district plans, which looking at them, they do. There's 4 priority areas in the district. I believe that each school should have goals addressed to those 4 priority areas, and that's something we'll work on. Not every plan does have goals for all 4 priority areas, so we'll work on that together as a district team with the schools. I believe that the plans should also be connected and aligned across schools, or across schools at each level, as well as looking at how they're aligned vertically from a transition from elementary to middle and into high school. How are those goals connected? For example, we brought up earlier about social emotional learning. Well, we want to make sure there's a connection in the plans of what's happening at the elementary level, moving onto the middle school, onto the high school. Right? So that's work that we will do. So it is going to be a focus at our retreat. It's going to be a focus of the work that we're going to do this summer. So this is an introduction to those plans, and I would like to come back later in the summer or September, once we have time to really develop these more, to present with you. I did tell the principals that I will expect that they attend as well. I think it's important that the principals are here and have the opportunity to share out their plans with you as well, and to be able to ask any questions. So there will be further conversations. This should be a live document. It shouldn't just be something that's written and put aside. This should be a document that is referred to throughout the school year at every school improvement team meeting that the schools are having. And I also believe that there should be regular updates being provided to the school committee on these plans from the district level and the building level, so you can see what those initiatives are and how those action plans are being put in place. So that's just kind of my overview of that. Bob, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, just because that would be great. Thank you.
No, I think Dr. Duba did a really nice job of summarizing where we are at this point, but I just thought, just procedurally, you might want to know, some of the work that has been happening up to this point, and Mr. Mezzanotte really has been doing a nice job of leading the work on these school improvement plans. He did present to you on the district strategic plan, and I agree that it would be a really good idea to have principals come in and present their plans and answer any questions that you may have. And I think it's important for everyone to know that when these plans are being developed, a variety of data is used to develop their goals. So it's of course student performance data that is reviewed by the school improvement teams, but it's also data like attendance data, discipline data. So lots and lots of survey works data is really helpful. We use that a lot in my prior district. So lots of data is utilized to develop the plan. And I think Dr. Duva's point about these plans being fluid documents, they really need to be on the front burner. They're not worth the paper they're written on if you don't refer to them on a regular basis, and that's something that we talk about frequently. And as Dr. Duva said, this will be one of the items that will be discussed when the administrative team is together for the retreat in August. Thank you.
So, thank you. I did put together just a matrix chart. It was just my way of kind of visually looking at every single plan because, you know, there's we have 5, 6, 7, 8 plans in front of us, right? So that was provided to you. It was also provided to the public. And so what I did was I looked at the goals in each plan and what priority area they come under, and just put that together for you so you can just see quickly what are the goals across the district under each priority area. So you can see for student academic achievement, every school has goals in that area, and there's a focus around positive student outcomes, academic outcomes for ELA and math on state testing. So using the RICAS testing at the elementary level and middle school level, and using the SATs at the high school level. And I broke that down for you. So at the district level, the goal that's in the district strategic plan, it's a 3-year plan, and it's to increase proficiency in those areas, between 5 to 8% over 3 years. And each of the schools wrote this plan for 1 year, and they're showing a 3% increase. So there's that alignment at the school level with the district level on those assessments, that to increase proficiency by 3% in each of those areas at each school. I want to point out that the high school also has a goal around increasing proficiency in the area of MLL with our students that receive MLL services. We know that with the recent report card, the high school received 2 stars as a result of the subgroup of an MLL, and that's an area that we need to work on. So the high school does have that addressed in their plan, and as well as an action plan for that. They also have in their plan a goal for the CTE programs of launching 1 new program for this year, and that is the machinist program that is working with Electric Boat and CCRI.
Dr. David, can I ask a quick question
Yes.
about the adding things like that? Are we supposed to be also looking Senate budget season, making sure we can fund
Right.
goals?
So whatever that is put into these school improvement plans, if there is a budgetary expense, we need to make sure that the school knows. And so, when we look at the budget for next year, we need to be thinking forward of what's going to be going in those plans. So looking at the current year and the progress that the schools are making, and if funding is needed, we need to start talking about that around October, November as we plan next year's budget. Any questions in that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that as well, knowing that the ESSER funding, is kind of sunsetting, if you will. And I know I very much appreciate having, these goals of 3% increases in different areas, but also knowing that the students that we are asking that from had a lot of learning loss and a lot of challenges, and that we might be losing some resources. Just trying to think about, I think it's important for the school committee to think about what that is going to mean to be able to not only get status quo, but then to have some increases with a student population that had some extreme circumstances in their learning. And so I appreciate the goal setting and the hope and desire for those increases, it's important, but I do think that we need to understand that that's going to come with resource needs, especially as the ESSER funding has been supporting some of those areas currently.
Just noting that it's important for us to be considering that any of those intervention and supports that are in place now, that money is going to end.
Next
And
budget
if that's
cycle.
part of these SIP plans, we need to account for that.
Yep. Yep.
The next priority area is around safe and supportive schools. I did note in what we need to work on in this area is really making sure that these goals are written in a more positive tone. I think we need to make sure that as we create goals that are to support students in school and looking at social emotional needs, that we are focusing on school belonging and student engagement and really looking at the SurveyWorks data, and that's what the principals did. You can see that some of their goals are around absenteeism. I think it's important that we do focus on how we are going to decrease chronically absent students, but I also believe we need to be proactive. And so what are we putting in place to really work on school culture? And what are we doing to increase student engagement and how students have a sense of belonging in their schools so they want to be there, and how we're supporting families. So this is something that I think we need to look at, and there'll be more work around this area as we move forward and work together as a district team. And then the next priority area is around a vision of the graduate. And the fourth priority area is around school facilities. So not every school has a goal under each priority area. So again, that is something as a district I believe we need to work on, and I want to work on with our administrators and school improvement teams so that we can identify goals in all four of these priority areas. And so that will be a focus of this summer, working with our teams.
I would add to that too, making sure that they are quantifiable, for lack of a better word, so like, provide school events. How many events? What is success? Because I think that's important for schools to be able to say, like, we did it, we achieved our success, we hit our goals. And so anytime that we can quantify the goals, I think that'll be helpful for morale.
And I agree. So the goals do need to be measurable, because we need to be able to report out on this. We need to make sure that the goals that are written are measurable, being referred to data. What will that data be that we're going to use to show the progress that we're making? And also too, once those goals are written, looking at the initiatives, how those initiatives are being connected, and what the action plan is, who's responsible for that.
So also with that, like around school facilities or things like that, if they're not having something done at their school, should it be about their school though and not other schools?
So the district plan was written, the goal in the district plan around school facilities had a focus on the new middle school.
Okay.
And I think we know that impacts all of our schools.
Yeah.
So we should be making sure that there's a connection to that. But you also bring up a good point that facilities at each school need to be looked at. And with the Educational Accountability Act, there is a responsibility on building principals to be responsible for their facilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so we should also be making sure that there's goals of looking at each of the facilities year to year, but also how are we, in designing a new middle school, how are the elementary schools feeding into that? And if it's going to, as we say, it's going to be a 5 to 8 middle school, that's an impact on the elementary schools, because now they will only be K to 4. And what does that programming look like? So there should be goals across the district of how all the elementary schools are working towards that. And at the other end, how does the building of the new middle school impact our high school and students transitioning from the middle school to the high school? And I think the vision of the graduate, you've got to look at that and work backwards. We did some work in Jamestown on our vision of the graduate, which was part of our strategic planning a few years ago. And we really focused backwards on that, and then put together programming that really focused on that vision of the graduate. So that's all the schools working together of what is that. So whatever that end goal is of the vision of the graduate for our 12th graders, we got to think about how does that start at preschool, right? So you've got to work backwards on that.
I know that Mr. Mezzanotte is already looking into that, of how that work's going to get done, but this is a start towards that. Anything you want to add?
No, I couldn't agree more. And just so that you all know, I know that, and I think it's important. Sorry.
Yeah, or sit here, either one.
Okay. No, I do just like, I just wanted to mention procedurally, I think it's important for the school committee to know and folks to know that, that Mr. Mezzanotte utilized the services of the Department of Ed to help each of the schools develop their school improvement plans. In fact, he had, at a meeting in the spring, he invited them in, and they were able to provide, I think, really helpful information to each of the administrators in helping them to develop their plans. So, and the other thing that I wanted to mention was I forget what it says on the document about what we want a graduate to look like. I know that Mr. Mezzanotte has done some prior work in his in the school system that he was in before coming to North Kingstown. He has someone that I think really does a nice job of helping a school district develop what they think the vision of a graduate should be. So I know he's hoping to bring that individual or that consultant in to help develop that plan.
One question I had, and I know we used a lot of data, but obviously the district invested money into that equity audit, and there were some differentials kind of based on student populations within the larger populations that definitely needed some additional support, et cetera. And so I'm sure that was utilized, but I think that's an important document to remember too when you're looking at things like, increasing standardized test scores and kind of thinking about, what that means for our district and also what that means in the country, et cetera, with the data that we know about things like the SATs and different things. I think that's an important consideration when setting the goals and considering how we're going to support students within them. Additional questions or comments at this point?
I have a few. So to touch on that with the equity audit, one of the findings from the equity audit was that equity and inclusion were not explicitly stated in the district's mission, vision, or core values anywhere. And only one of the schools actually specifically touched on equity in their school improvement plan, and it was Stony Lane, and I was really glad to see that. I had reached out to Shivali about the high school's one because I had been on the high school school improvement team, and she had actually reached out to me to see whether somebody from the DEI subcommittee could sit in on their vision of a graduate program. So she recognizes that equity needs to be baked into those types of things. So I'm happy about that. But I'd like to see that as part of these moving forward, because I do think we in the DEI subcommittee are working on that, but that should be baked into all of these types of things. I see that it notes that the EB program and the machinist, and I'm super excited about that. I think that's a great pathway for the CTE program. I just wanted to mention again that medical CTE seemed to be a big topic at the democracy and the what's the other one? The senior project. So just food for thought. If we're thinking of expanding our CTE programs, that seems to be one that the students are really excited about and feel a need for. You touched on one of the things about the negative framing of the goals. That was something that really struck out to me on the focus on the insubordination and the disorderly conduct. So I'm looking forward to seeing those maybe being reframed in a more positive statistic, maybe more around feeling more connected to school versus, being focused on that. The perfect attendance, I stuck out on me too. You touched on it with the chronic absenteeism, but I am not comfortable with focusing on perfect attendance. It doesn't sit right with me. And I would like to hear if that's something that they're focusing on, why they are focusing on that. I mean, students are not responsible for their attendance. There are many reasons why a student doesn't come to school. We had a presentation from the truancy officer that was very impactful about reasons why students are unable to come to school. And, QUID focused on improving attendance, and being very welcoming to a student who does come to school when they're unable, when they haven't been. And I just think, we've learned a lot, I think, over the past few years about why forcing or why that grind mentality and the pushing your way through is not necessarily something that we should be highlighting, especially for kids. So I'm concerned with the focus from 2 schools on perfect attendance.
I think that's a discussion definitely to have at the school level around perfect attendance. I think that could add additional stressors onto children.
Yep.
They even have to be at school.
Yes.
Where we want students at school.
Absolutely.
We want students
Yep.
to love school and be there. But like you said, sometimes a student's lack of attendance isn't always their fault. There could be other barriers that we're unaware of.
Yeah.
And I think we need to work on identifying what those barriers may be.
Right.
And rewarding students for perfect attendance. There are kids that may not get that and wonder, well, they may want that and they can't get that, or there's the other barriers that are getting in the way and just add additional stressors of, I got to be at school, I might be sick.
Right.
And you
that
need to be
one-
home.
that one stood-
And that's
stood out to
okay
me,
to be
right,
home, right?
right.
It's okay to be home if you're sick. So I think there's other ways of looking at how we improve attendance and recognizing children that are in school, but also knowing that we need to support families and we need to support students on being in school. And if there are barriers, identifying what those barriers are and working with our families.
Right. And I know that chronic absenteeism is a huge issue and that kids can't learn unless they're in school, but like to just put like a shiny sticker on it overlooks like the real barriers to why kids aren't there. Poverty, trauma, violence in the household, things like that. I think you get it. And then the other thing that stuck out on me is just, I think people are very clear where I stand, with students, student resource officers in the school, but I have a real issue with the students being sworn in by a police officer in the elementary school, like deputizing elementary school children in a school is a real issue for me. Like, I don't feel that we need to be bringing the policing model into the elementary school system, so I would really like to hear more about what that is and why they feel that's appropriate. We just talked about restorative justice and that type of thing. I don't think that is something, putting aside the fact that there are children who do not feel comfortable with law enforcement and you're like supposedly incentivizing them to want to apply for these ambassador positions, that's going to disqualify some students from wanting to apply right off the bat. Like, I think there are other ways to have an ambassador program without needing to bring law enforcement into it. So that's something that I would really...
And those are, again, other conversations we've had at the building level.
Yeah.
to
So
discuss.
I just, that was something that really stood out to me. But I think other than that, things look...
Yeah, I think this is a great plan for us to start with.
Yep.
And then as, like saying, with a lot of, with new administration coming together and really, taking this
Yeah.
plan, all the school plans and working on it.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank Mr. Mezzanotte for the time that he has spent working with
And the building principals, I
on
mean,
this.
I
And
know how
Yes.
much it works. I was on the high school sit team. It's so much work
It
by the
takes-
principals, and it takes so much
it
to
takes
get
a lot
the
of
people
time.
coming
And-
to. It really is a lot
And
of
there are
work.
new expectations
Yeah.
now from RIDE of what
Yeah.
we need to put in place. And we need to understand that these expectations are new, and it's going to take time to make sure that we're meeting those requirements in the way that's expected and working together as a district to fulfill those requirements.
Yes.
So I do want to thank everyone that
Yeah.
has put the time and effort in to create these plans and get them in a timely manner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and thank you. Having different sets of eyes, looking at the plans is helpful to us. It'll only help us get better.
And it sounded like the school committee can anticipate maybe some revised documents coming forward in the next couple of months.
We're going to work on
Yeah.
this, and so then we will bring this back as
Yeah.
we make changes to it.
Yeah. And just a clarifying question, I know, is it annually you have to resubmit these to?
Yes.
So we'll have a district 3-year plan, but then
You have a district
1-year plans.
3-year, the school
Yeah.
plan gets reapproved every year, and within the school improvement planning program that is with RIDE, you also have to document your progress in there. So when you go in to create the plan, like the student academic achievement plans, they're all connected to the state testing. So you go in, you look at what your baseline is, you set what your goal is going to be, and it actually shows a chart of where you need to go, and it shows a trend line. So each year you plug in that information, you'll see are we following that trend line to meet that goal.
Any Any other discussion on this topic? Okay, thank you all. Thank you so much. And so, moving on to reports, we obviously moved the building subcommittee one up, so that has already been done. Is there anything for item A that needs to be discussed? I know we had an attachment that I believe is like that.
Personnel action.
Yeah,
It's a recap.
yeah, just a recap of personnel actions to make sure that the school committee is aware and that it's obviously public information. And so if anyone has any questions regarding that document, but otherwise you were provided it. Okay, hearing none, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Very fast, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you all for attending.